Hi, this is Kip, and I thought I would do a video, may not be a quick video, on the Georgia legislative process and specifically breaking down some terms that you may hear if you're watching the session online. Every year for the past several years, I have posted like the legislative glossary on my Facebook page. But this year, I thought it would be good to kind of like do a quick video to kind of explain some of these terms because I'm sure many of you have heard these terms when you're watching the sessions and wonder, well, what's that about? What are they talking about? So we are going to try to explain the best way we can, all right? All right, so in that space where members may mention a dinner or a lunch in announcements, what that typically means, that's a meal sponsored by lobbyists. It can be one legislator with one lobbyist or an entire committee, which historically has been referred to as a committee dinner, sponsored by several lobbyists whose clients want to pass or otherwise impact legislation that is currently before that committee. So if you hear someone going to the well and talking about we're going to have a little dinner or we're going to have a little lunch once the adjournment, that's what that means. All right. So another term that I really like is a little help. Usually, when a legislator asks for more money for a local program or a constituent, sometimes it's also used to help an industry or a group pay fewer taxes. But it could be a variety of reasons, all right? As in, Ace Company needs a little help with these high fuel prices, and we need to give them a little help on their taxes. That's what that means. Administration bill. What that typically means is a piece of legislation that the governor wants to be passed either in the House or the Senate. The governor has floor leaders in both houses of the legislature, and it's their job to advocate and to shepherd through those bills that the governor has identified that they want to see passed. And you will clearly see, may not always be in the well, but if you hear it in news reports that this is an administration bill, it might be during discussion of the bill on the floor. There may be a representative or senator that will say something along those lines. If it's an administration bill, that's exactly what that means. Agency bill. Very simple. This is a bill that is requested by one of the various state agencies. Amendment. Very easy. A change to a bill. Any type of modifications that's made to a piece of legislation is done by amendment. And I can get into the letters that go on bills so you can clearly identify amendments, but that's for another video. Author. The author of a bill or piece of legislation can be a legislator, it could be legislative counsel, lobbyists, or a special interest association. Same thing as sponsor. Those terms can be interchangeable. Big budget. Big budget means the state budget for the upcoming fiscal year. When you hear them talk about for this year, I think that would be the FY 26 budget. That would be the big budget. Catfish. Well, that's an old school term for a bill that gets gutted of any substance. And primarily that can happen usually after crossover day during the latter part of the legislative session. Cease all audible conversation. I know you've wondered what that means. What that means basically shut up. So in the House, you'll hear the Speaker say that. In the Senate, you'll hear the Lieutenant Governor make that statement. And it means that they're trying to get order in the legislative session in that House. And it usually is preceded or followed by real intense slamming of the gavel. So when you hear either the House Speaker or the LTG say, cease all audible conversation and carry them to the anteroom, that means stop talking or just quiet down. And if you are in an intense conversation, carry it outside. That's basically what that means. Conference committee. That's a 6-member committee, and it consists of 3 representatives, 3 senators, designated by the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor, and it's to reconcile versions of a bill that's passed both chambers. You'll start to see that a lot around the end of the legislative session, and you will hear that you'll hear something like the conferees have agreed to these changes or whatever. But that's basically what it means. Anytime that you hear that a conference committee has been appointed, it's always going to consist of both senators and representatives, and it will be equal number, 3 and 3. Constitutional amendment. What that means, and you'll really start to hear that term in like the last year of the 2-year session. There's always a move to add amendments on the ballot in election years, and voters throughout the state ultimately must approve the amendment, and I believe it requires, 50% plus 1 in order to pass a constitutional amendment. However, the measure must pass both the House as well as the Senate with a 2/3 majority. So this year, 2025, you won't hear much talk about constitutional amendments this year, but next year, it's a good chance you probably will. Christmas tree. I love that. So Christmas tree is a bill that gets lots of other bills amended to it. And it generally happens at the tail end of every session. Common with tax break legislation. If you hear the word vehicle, it's interchangeable with Christmas tree. So it all means the same thing. Dead. You're going to hear the word dead a lot during, like after crossover day and toward the end of the session. That describes a piece of legislation that is no longer viable, at least for that particular moment in time. Such legislation can be resuscitated, often being tied to a Christmas tree. Devotional. So, devotional is the sermon that lawmakers get at the beginning of every day in both the House and the Senate before the legislative business starts for that particular day. Doctor of the day. So the doctor of the day are local doctors throughout the state who volunteer to work a day at the Capitol Medical Station, which is located on the, I believe it's on the second floor, who are introduced to the legislators to work a particular legislative day. So they're there for a single day. And they are there to offer free care to legislators and others at the Capitol during the legislative session. So if you're ever up at the Capitol and you might need, maybe an aspirin or something of that nature, swing by the medical station. There probably will be somebody there that will help you, and there'll also be a nurse there as well. Fiscal note. Now that's a term that you will hear throughout the legislative session from start to finish. And what that means is, what is the estimate on the state treasury of that particular piece of legislation? And legislators are required to get a fiscal note for most pieces of legislation. So that's a term that I would pay very close attention to, and you will hear it a lot. Okay, so this is a very easy one. Fiscal year. Fiscal year is the year covered by the state's budget, which typically runs from July 1st, which is the start of the fiscal year, to June 30th of the following calendar year. So that's the fiscal year. Okay, so what do they mean when they say the gentleman from such and such or the lady from such and such? Well, that's how lawmakers refer to one another on the floor when they're discussing a bill. They don't call each other's names, or they're not supposed to call each other's names. If they are talking about a legislator, they usually refer to the county or the area that legislator is from. So that's what that means. And almost always, if they're referring to the chairman of a committee, they will say the chairman of such and such committee. But they never say the person's name, and certainly not their first name, not on the floor. Not good decorum at all. Hand vote. All right, so a hand vote allows lawmakers to vote on bills without a record of how they voted. The number of hands are counted, not whose hand is raised, often used right after lunch when many members are slow to returning to the chamber. I don't think that they do this much anymore, but I would pay close attention, okay? A term that you'll hear quite a bit through the session is what's called a housekeeping bill. And a housekeeping bill, it fixes small or technical problems in law. Occasionally bigger changes are slipped in late in the session when nobody is looking. But for the most part, any time that there is some type of flaw in terms of the technical description. A housekeeping bill is crafted to try to correct that flaw. Leadership. Well, it means just exactly what you probably think it means. The House Speaker, the Lieutenant Governor, the House Majority Leader, the Senate Majority Leader, um, the leadership team of the majority party in both houses. They consist of leadership. The little budget. And no, I don't mean LIDDLE. Little budget is the mid-year spending plan, or another way to describe it is the supplemental budget, and it helps fund the final few months of state agencies of the current fiscal year. Not ready, as in the bill's not quite ready. Usually means that the bill is being held up, often as a hostage be used for later trade and passage of other pieces of legislation. It could also mean a whole lot of other variables, but that's just a thumbnail explanation. Friends in the hall, also known as people in the hall. Lobbyists, as in our friends in the hall support this bill. Reconsideration, that's another term that you'll probably hear in the latter part of the session. When a bill or amendment is brought up for another vote. So if you're watching the floor session, they take a vote of a particular bill, and it's usually a close vote. The bill sponsor will probably ask for a reconsideration. Sometimes it may be the next legislative day, but that's generally what that means. Recommit. All right, so to recommit means to send a bill that was on the floor back to the committee of which it originated. So you may be watching the floor action, and once there's a vote taken, you may hear that there will be a motion to recommit this bill, or the speaker or the lieutenant governor will say something along the lines of, the sponsor has requested that this bill be recommitted back to committee. So that's generally what that means. Rules. The committee, both Senate rules, House rules, decides whether a bill will be debated by the full chamber. I think it's after day 10 on both sides, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. It sets the calendar. So when you go to either the Senate clerk's office or the clerk of the House, and you see the rules calendar, that's the calendar of that particular legislative day. And the Rules Committee sets the pieces of legislation that the House or Senate will debate and take action on for that particular legislative day. Sine die. Now, day 40 is sine die. That's a Latin term, and it means adjournment without recall. On the last day of the session, the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor, they try to gavel at the same time, both houses, and they slam the gavels down. You've probably seen the dramatic scene. They'll be on the phone with each other. both the doors of the House and Senate are open, and that's right before you see all of the papers start flying to commemorate like this is really the end of the session. So day 40 is the end of the legislative session. Sine die. Um, that means when they adjourn, the session is done for that particular year. They will not be coming back until the following year, unless the governor calls them back for special session. That's different. Sponsor, and that's the same as author, which we talked about a moment ago. Legislator who files a bill and generally promotes it through the legislative process. All right. Study committee. Study committee. You'll hear that usually at the tail end of every legislative session. And basically, it is where bills often go when lawmakers are not ready to act on them or they want to do more research. Sometimes the bills are refined by the study committee and will come up the next legislative session. Sometimes they may not see the light of day again. But that's what study committee means. Sunset. When a law or an agency expires. Usually legislation or an agency is about to sunset, gets renewed before it ever dies or expires. Unlock the machines. What the leader of the chamber, either the Speaker of the House or the Lieutenant Governor, says before members vote on a particular bill. The unlocking allows members to have their vote registered electronically on the display. So that's what that means. And last but not least, well. So the well is the front of the House and the front of the Senate where members speak and they talk about legislation. They go up there to give announcements, to do morning orders, afternoon orders, that type of thing. So you'll hear if a gentleman's in the well, that means that they are at the place that legislators are designated to speak in the particular chamber. That's it. So I hope that you got something out of this. I may do a double down. I may double down with some of these terms, but I wanted to give a real good highlight of some of the key terms. Continue to watch the legislative session online and keep watching this space because we'll have more insight for you. All right. But thanks for watching. Appreciate it.